Hello everyone and welcome to Warwick Anglican Parish. My name's Lizzie and I'm the parish priest. If you're joining us today, this is part of our online faith formation course. We're basing it on Archbishop Rowan William's book, Being Christian. In this session, we come to the fourth and final of his Christian essentials. This is prayer. I don't know about you, but I found this chapter really interesting and also challenging. I really liked the way in which the Archbishop drew a number of ancient truths from a number of ancient sources, looking at the lives of Origen, Gregory of Nyssa and John Cassian, all of whom had something to say about the importance of the discipline of prayer to the life of faith. I've also tried to weave in a couple of other prayers from Christian pastors, practitioners, leaders and thinkers over the last couple of thousand years. So if you haven't already done so, perhaps pause the clip now and do read the prayer chapter. Note down any thoughts, comments, questions you have. Please do share those on our Faith Formation Facebook page. Email me if you'd prefer that method of communication, or if you are from the parish, you might like to have a chat. I'd love to hear from you. So let's have a look at what prayer is, and indeed, let's start to think about what prayer is not. I recently watched a really fascinating documentary that, among other subjects, looked at the National Prayer Breakfast, an annual event occurring in Washington, D.C., involving many of the great and the good, senators, congresspeople, right up to the President of the United States themselves. It was instigated some decades ago now, and while the idea of uniting in prayer is excellent, it appears that that is not the only idea at work here. The conservative and secretive group that is largely behind it appears to have an agenda that also includes actively cultivating people in positions of power or leadership. In turn, the prayer breakfast seems to have been misused by some attendants, people who have wanted to garner power or influence for themselves or to co-opt support from particular groups. Whatever its best or indeed its worst uses, it certainly seems to be an opportunity for some very influential people to get together in a highly public, highly publicised way to pray for certain things. I'm not entirely sure that that is what prayer is about, any more than it's about spelling out your wish list for God to take care of. This strays into what's called prosperity theology, which is an idea that takes certain themes, statements, ideas from the Bible, even statements from Jesus himself, and turns God into a kind of genie in the lamp, serving not human rights, but the right humans. So what is prayer all about? I think in this final chapter, we could almost begin at the ending. I really appreciated Archbishop Rowan's summary of 3 core points in the last few pages. Firstly, he says, prayer is God's work in us. That's a significant directional shift. It is not about us trying to persuade God to like us or to get interested in us. Secondly, he says there is a deep connection between your prayer life and living justly. In other words, you can't just say the words and end of story. You have to live the actions. There's a little piece from the Christian scriptures, the letter of James, chapter 2, 15 to 16, that touches on this idea quite beautifully. You might like to look it up. Thirdly, he says that you have to keep at it. Being persistent in prayer is important, even when, as far as you can see, doesn't appear to be working. Prayer, he says, is your promise to be there for the God who is there for you. So what do we have? Prayer is not about cultivating or grooming God. Prayer is a conversation in which we leave ourselves open to God's Spirit within us, changing us, making clear our own hidden flaws or agendas, the ego trips and the insecurities, shining light on those things that are gifts to us, talents that we might use to bless the world, and attuning ourselves to the voice of God. In this conversation, we find ourselves transformed. I love this particular idea that the Archbishop expresses in the book. One of the most crucial aspects of prayer is to understand it as a constant growth, a constant movement into an endless mystery. I think that's beautifully put. Now, I've coupled that statement with this prayer. This is from Catherine of Siena. Catherine of Siena was a woman who lived in the 14th century, and she spoke the truth to power. She did so with courage and conviction. She spoke out particularly to the power wielded by the church in her day. Lord, she prays, take me from myself and give me to yourself. Mystery, growth, a conversation, God's work in us. These things are what prayer is about. So, how do we make a start? People will often tell me that they're nervous about prayer because they don't know the right or religious language to use. This is an important thing to remember. Jesus kept it very simple. He called God Abba, which means father, or more informally, daddy. It's a really affectionate term, an intimate term. We know that Jesus prayed often, and while we don't know what he prayed on the many occasions that he withdrew from his friends, his disciples, the crowds who were following him to be alone with God in prayer, we do know that he did this regularly through his ministry. He prayed when things were going well, and he prayed when things were not going well. Some of the prayers that we read with most depth and detail occur during Holy Week. He prayed when what was unfolding was for him overwhelming, a looming death on a cross. He prayed on the night before he died at a place called the Mount of Olives, that if it was possible, God might take such brutal, unjust suffering away from him. But then he also prayed, yet not my will, but yours be done. In our 3 Bible passages this week, and you'll notice they're all from Luke's Gospel, we get a sense of what Jesus is about when he talks about prayer. We get a sense of the simplicity of prayer. Take a look at Luke 11:1-4. This is the Lord's Prayer. You'll also find that in Matthew's Gospel. We get a sense of prayer having a particular integrity in the hands of those who know just how broken and lost they are, as opposed to those who are successful, powerful, and right. And this is what we capture in Jesus' parable of the tax collector and the Pharisee. Finally, we hear in this prayer at the Mount of Olives, Jesus committing his whole life to God in prayer, even in the midst of acute suffering and pain. Read and reflect on these 3 passages in your own time, and as usual, ask yourself those questions. What does each of these passages tell us about who God is and how God acts? And that being the case, what is it that we should be taking away from these passages for our lives? Ask yourself, as the Archbishop's encouraged us before, to consider where you are in each of these accounts. Finally, there are 3 groups of questions, but we're just going to look at the first 2 first up, right at the end of the book. These 2 are well worth reflecting on further. Here's a prayer, the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, that begins, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. We used it at the beginning of our Faith Formation course. Finally, let's use the 3rd section of the Archbishop's reflection points that he describes for us on the very last page in the book as a way into our prayer for today. As he says, when you pray, you need to set aside time and to settle and to be silent and to be still. So you'll need to pick your time of day. Maybe you are an early morning riser. That might be a great time for you to pray. Perhaps you're more an evening person. Select a time where you're going to have a little bit of time on your own, and then slowly block out the different distractions. Slow your breathing and become more aware of it. Choose one of the short prayer phrases that he suggests there, or maybe you'd like to choose another from the Bible or from our PowerPoint today. For example, the prayer that we read before from Catherine of Siena. Repeat this prayerful phrase to yourself, fitting in with the patterns of your breathing in and out. For example, Lord, take me from myself and give me to yourself. Lord, take me from myself and give me to yourself. Spend some time just in this particular practice or discipline. Be open to God's Spirit within you. Thank you for joining us over these past 4 sessions. I hope you've enjoyed reading, being Christian. I'd really encourage you as a next step to perhaps consider joining part of a study group, a prayer group, or a reflection group of some kind. If you are from Warwick Anglican Parish, please ask me and we can work out a group that might suit you. It really helps, I think, on the journey of faith and life to share with people who are interested in those questions and keen to share with you. I'm going to finish with a little passage from the letter to the Philippians in the Christian Scriptures, 1 verse 6. Philippians 1 verse 6. It reads, I am confident of this, that the one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion on the day of Jesus Christ. So, have courage, be confident, ask questions, and always place God's love, God's grace and forgiveness at the very centre of your lives, and be a blessing, just as surely as you are blessed. Amen.